A demon invasion, you say? That sounds terrible for the economy. Ah, I see that they are already at our doors. It seems I will have to use all that I have learned in my time as a king to survive this encounter. I surrender! Warsim, Realm of Aslona is a somewhat niche and charming game. A game about being a benevolent and just king, managing your kingdom, your people, and most importantly, your money. Warsim is a game that is a little bit hard to explain. Unlike a lot of strategy or management games, Warsim is a lot less about carefully planning your moves, but instead of following the scientific method of fucking around and finding out. Because of this, there is a lot of things you can do, not all of them being efficient or recommended if you actually want to do well. However, as a king, your boredom is a bigger enemy than the collapse of your empire, and it doesn't matter if your questionable choices lead to the demise of your kingdom, as long as it's funny. And I know what you must be thinking, but Cal, this game looks graphically intensive. How can my Nvidia Titan V, with 12GB of memory, 640 tensor cores, and 100% teraflops of performance run this beautiful game? Well, fear not, because despite this game having the highest, most realistic graphics known to man, it has been finely optimized to run on a fucking console command, so you can probably run it. Jokes aside, despite the fact that I usually do not like ASCII as a lot of the time it ends up hurting my eyes and making the game more confusing than engaging, Warsim is one of those rare exceptions where the ASCII art works perfectly to make you visualize what is happening. The colors are used well and don't feel out of place. It still lets you use your imagination while still giving you very good visual feedback. Mechanics. When you start off, you create a kingdom and a world. Other kingdoms will usually be randomly generated with randomly generated races. Those races can vary in levels of sentience and power levels, and they all have their own customs and perks. Despite being randomly generated, they all feel unique in their own way because of it. However, your kingdom will always be made of humans, with some notable exceptions. You also have to decide how you became a ruler. Your origin decides how you start out and can affect a bunch of things. Maybe you're someone that won a gamble against the king and inherited the kingdom as a result. Or a gladiator that won his title of king in a deathmatch. No matter what you pick, you'll always be the king, and you now have a kingdom to run. A kingdom that, depending on the difficulty chosen or the races that you undo, might be easy or an absolute nightmare. The early game is always the hardest part, as you have to stabilize the kingdom while being fucked from every side. And it's kind of hard to run your kingdom when you have no idea what the fuck you're doing. Your first priority should always be money. Money is how you improve your kingdom, or at least make it not instantly collapse. But to get money, you need money. Money that you thought you had, but bandits keep raiding your fucking vaults, and you do not have any money left to make any kind of security system. So, how do we get money? Well, in a lot of ways. The first and the most obvious is war. Send your army to some place that isn't heavily defended and raid them back. But your army usually starts off rather weak and you want to keep your army in good shape in case you get invaded yourself. Another more reliable way is exploring. You see, every year you can explore. Exploring leads to many results. You can discover things like traders, mines, villages, or really anything you can think of. However, when you deal with those encounters, you need to remember that you're still a king. That means that you can force people to give you tribute. If you see a mine that isn't yours, you can make it yours with your army. A king does not ask, a king takes, and the common folks usually do not have an army of their own to dispute your demands. You could also take a massive loan out of a bank and gamble all the taxpayer money on homeless people fighting on the arena. It's surprisingly easy and kind of broken to gamble on the arena, as a weak cursed goblin usually has slightly less of a chance to win against Josh the behemoth ass render. This makes a lot of the arena fights extremely predictable and quite easy to bet on, which is why I try to not abuse it too much. You can also wait in your throne and see visitors. Some visitors may come to see if they can join the army, or be a criminal that is brought by guards so that you can choose their fate. Personally, I recommend robbing every single gambler of their money, give all goblins to the goblin slave master, and imprison anyone that mildly annoys you. Your reputation may slightly suffer, but you're a king, and anyone that doesn't directly benefit you should be put in prison where they can serve the glorious state of Aslona. Now, I have talked a lot about managing the kingdom, but not about war. Strange for a game called Warsim. Well, that's because war in this game is actually not a whole lot about the battles themselves, as much as it is about the previously mentioned money. Your army has a battle score, which is the combined power of all the units in your army and their equipment. You can get soldiers and weapons by, you guessed it, buying them. But there are ways to make your army more efficient for less cost, such as mandatory service, buying a metric ton of goblins for dirt cheap, gamble money on mystery slaves and hope you get a unit that doesn't suck ass, and much more. You have 3 main battle units. One of those are peasants, who mostly exist to work the fields and pay taxes, so you don't want to send your main source of income into battle if possible. Soldiers who are reliable but rather expensive combat units, and knights who are extremely expensive and hard to acquire but make peasants go through a training montage and turn them into soldiers. Once you've amassed enough of those meat sacks, it's time to send them into the meat grinder. What you want to do with war is capture as much land as you can, as that means more money. Money that you can use on upgrading your kingdom and army, that you can use to get more land, that you can use to get more money, you get the gist of it. This is why the early game is the hardest part, because you've got very little money and army to properly fight with. But once you stabilize, it's really easy to start snowballing out of control as your army and treasury gets exponentially bigger until you are essentially unstoppable. This is why I would not call war the main appeal of the game. It's technically the goal, but it's not the journey. This is a game about embracing the dictator lifestyle. It's about exploring the world and make it bend to your will if you so desire, or simply interact with it in a more peaceful manner if you find it more interesting. Compassion isn't always rewarded, but violence isn't always the optimal solution either. And a lot of the random events and things you can do are charming and enjoyable by themselves without them needing to reward you by the end of it to be worthwhile. Now, there is one thing that does warrant making a big army other than going on a power trip, and that thing is the demonic invasion. Once enough time has passed, the demon horde appears. They are way stronger than any unit you can think of, take no prisoners, destroy every land you come across, and generally are an absolutely terrifying force of nature that every nation will have to try and fail to stop. When that happens, you usually have 2 options. One is to try and brute force your way through the demon army by throwing enough units at them. The other is to throw a couple of peasants in a lava pit which will stop the demon horde from growing any bigger. For a year. You have to throw peasants in there every year to stop the growth. Now you may think that the warmongering expansionist empire with high taxes and mandatory military service that throws people into volcanoes every year may have a bad reputation. However, because I offer happy meals to poor people yearly, my reputation is somehow at a net positive in the eyes of the unwashed masses. I use the precious time that the sacrifices give me to build a massive army and find the demon portal that the demons spawn from, and then I invade hell itself. Oh, the demons are powerful, for sure, and there's a lot of them, but there's a lot more of us, and we have enough cash to buy the sun. So we will not stop until every single red fiend is used to feed our crops. Of course, if you're a demon worshipper, you'll have a waste your time, as the demons will spare you and destroy every other single kingdom that isn't you. And they will even give you demons to fight with, that is until there is nothing left, in which case the demon lord will see that you've outlived your usefulness and it's time for you to join the others in the abyss. There is a lot more stuff that you can do, and it would take me ages to explain them, but you should discover that for yourself. Warsim is a game where the fun comes from trying to see all that you can do, and explaining all of that would ruin part of that fun. It's a game that, despite not having played it as much as other games in my Steam library, I still consider it one of my favorite games, as it's a very unique and charming experience.